So our topic today is continuing on our OEM-specific training series we've been doing this year, and next up is Nissan. So we're going to talk about, the history of the company, what makes them unique, what certain issues that they might have, and spoiler alert, they're very reliable, so not a lot of weird issues, but we still have a couple that we're going to talk about. So first off, let's go back in time and start with the history. So Nissan as a company was founded by Masujiro Hashimoto. I think I did a pretty good job with that. 1914. They manufactured the first car, which was called the DAT, in 1914 as well. They had multiple mergers and name changes throughout the 1920s, and then created their first Datsun, later respelled to Sun, and we'll talk about that in a second, Datsun in 1933. They later changed it to that Datsun, S-U-N, instead of S-O-N, as S-O-N in Japanese also means loss, and they didn't want to associate it with a negative thinking, right? So they had the positive, they changed it to Datsun, right? In 1934, Nissan Motor Company Ltd. was formed, and that was your first official naming of Nissan, so way back in 1934. They were a major vehicle supplier to the U.S. during the Korean War as well. During the 1950s and 60s, Nissan really expanded globally, Europe and so on, and over into the U.S. as well. They established their first U.S. manufacturing plant in 1980, and they continued selling cars under the Datsun brand until about 1984, 1985. I remember my mother had a Datsun wagon. It was like a pale yellow color with like a forest green vinyl interior. It was like the strangest color combination, and it was a stick shift too. So that was kind of a weird little car, but I remember it vividly. After that, Infiniti was launched in 1989, and in 1999 they entered a partnership with Renault, and that's really more over like in Europe, right? But they are in a partnership. Nissan and Renault are kind of together. So we see the three brands we would have talked about over in the United States. Now it's just really Nissan and Infiniti. So let's talk about the top models, top cars, and I did add Infiniti in there. I do notice that they are a rather slow seller, but Nissan overall top seller by far in the last 10 years. So we always take our 10-year span. We had a study done. So Nissan Rogue, 3 million, a little over 3 million units in those 10 years. And of course, the Altima and the Sentra, also two very popular models as well. And then it drops off after that. You get the Murano. Then you get down to the Q50 is the only Infiniti to make this list with just 284,000 sales numbers by that over that whole time. And then, of course, the Titan down here as well, the big pickup truck. So we figured we'd take a few examples out of here. So we got the 2018 Rogue, which was kind of their high water mark for that year for sales. So second generation of the Rogue in 2018 was offered that year with a 2-liter hybrid drivetrain and a 2.5-liter naturally aspirated engine. The naturally aspirated engine got a CVT transmission. Of course, hybrids have the hybrid powertrain. Numerous ADAS features were first standard on this year. Before that, they were kind of optional. And then ProPilot Assist, which we're going to talk more about in a little bit, was offered as an option, and that takes all those ADAS sensors and helps the driver out with driving. Another one, the number 2 car was an Altima, so the 2014 was the high water mark for there. It is the 5th generation of the Altima at that point, 2.5-liter and 3.5-liter naturally aspirated engines. And by the way, I think Nissan, more than most manufacturers in this time frame, really share powertrains. They only have a couple different engines that they use kind of across the board, right? This 2.5-liter engine that's in this Altima is the same 2.5-liter engine that was in that Rogue. The 3.5-liter engine in the Altima is also in a Maxima, right? So they share a lot of powertrains across. So in that vein, they're going to share a lot of the same problems across the board too. CVT transmission in that, and we know Nissan's got had tons of problems with their CVTs. Not sure how it's going now, but I know that in the past it's definitely problems with them. And it was the first model year where no Altima Coupe was offered. So if you wanted a 2-door Altima, you'd have to go older than 2014, I guess. And then I pulled the one Infinity off the list just for a little bit of variety. So the 2016 Q50 was the high water mark for that. It was the second generation model, available with a 2-liter and 3-liter turbo engines. So the Infinities get turbos, the Nissans really didn't. And also offered a 3.5-liter hybrid, which I think seems a little odd if you think about most hybrid vehicles. And if you look at the other two that were up there, especially like the Rogue, usually it's the smaller of the two engine is in the hybrid, but in this case, it's a 3.5-liter V6 in the hybrid. So, and this one did not offer the CVT. It was a 7-speed automatic as well. So some differences between there. And you find that I've noticed that a lot as well between, especially these Japanese brands where they had their luxury brand, right? They may throw some oddball equipment in there. So that one's got some little differences. All right, so let's talk about some common issues, and I already kind of talked about one of them. It was the transmission issue, right? So CVTs, and this is out of this is an example out of one of their bulletins on the CVT and diagnosing CVT problems, and you can look in there with a borescope and see the CVT belt, and that one's definitely worn out, right? It's got some scuffing on it, so the clearance issues, it had some clearance issues in there, so that's a no good belt. You've seen that picture. Intake system issues. We're going to see a code come up. So the next thing we're going to talk about is codes, and it's super common just across the board. That isn't to say that they're not necessarily reliable, because that's the impression I've gotten from between doing my research and talking to techs who work on them. They're like, they really didn't have any weird problems other than the CVT issues. But then there's this certain intake system issue too that we'll talk about. EVAP issues, just like any other vehicle, it's going to have EVAP issues. Those are just kind of hard to diagnose, I guess. Maybe get it right the first time, I suppose. So that brings us to common codes. So common codes, and if you look, top 2 codes are CVT related, and the rest of them are the same exact code across different multiple engines. It seems to be a lot in the Sentra for some reason, but mass airflow circuit A Ranger performance, the P0101 code, is 8 out of the top 10 codes on Nissan and Infinity. Infinity didn't show up on the list, but hey, it's still top 10 codes. And we're actually gonna look at one of those. The Altima is one of the top codes on the Altima as well. So when we get to look at the real world data, we're gonna see that P0101 code is number 1, and there's actually a bulletin on it that tells. It's kind of a little wild how they go to diagnose it, but hey, if that's the cure, that's the cure, right? So, yeah, not a lot to talk about here. It's CVT issues and this mass airflow issue. So, but I think the real value is in the data, right? So I know where or you would know if you look at the data, where the common problems are for these vehicles. Let's get to OEM specific features, and the one I picked out for this one is ProPilot Assist. This one's kind of interesting how it works. It's almost like a self-driving car, but it's really not. It is a hands-on driver assist system that combines Nissan's intelligent cruise control and steering assist technologies, and includes a stop and hold function that can bring the vehicle to a full stop, hold in place, and then bring you back up to speed when traffic starts moving again. So that's useful if you're in traffic. I tried it one time when I had a rental. I think it was a Murano or something that had this, and I was in a, maybe like a state highway where they had stoplights periodically. So you could go and you would let the thing go, and when it stopped, as long as there was a car in front of you at the stoplight, and then they took off, the vehicle would take off too. So that was kind of neat. You still have to have your hands on the wheel and stuff like that, but it's kind of like a minimal automated driving, which I thought was kind of nice. And I figured it'd be really good for traffic. If I was going through like New York City or something, going over the George Washington Bridge, that's just constant stop and go, right? So with that, going through that. There's also ProPilot Assist with Navilink, which syncs with the navigation system, providing additional information to better predict the freeway ahead. New features include speed adjust by route that can help reduce your speed for tight curves and off ramps, as well as speed limit assist that gives drivers the option to quickly adjust the set speed to the posted speed limit. Both features allow for more intuitive, enjoyable drives. I think that was kind of interesting. They're the ones, Nissan's really the ones that have been pushing this anyway. Some other cars, may be able to do it or whatever, but, they have whole commercial campaigns just on this one feature on the car. So other than that, they're fairly plain Jane vehicles. They don't have a whole lot of bells and whistles. I had a 2023 Sentra for a rental car like last year, and it still had like a 2-wire coil-on plug system. So they didn't even get fancy with that. It was just kind of a basic 4-cylinder 1.8-liter engine. So it is unique to them, but this is definitely they don't get too fancy. They get really fancy around the car, I guess, right, with the ADAS stuff. So now let's get to tips from a tech. And the first one's going to be from me. And this is just kind of general advice on completing functional tests, resets, relearns that we might have to do on it. And this is for the idle learn, right? So there is an idle learn that you need to do fairly often on Nissans. And the one thing that seems to give people grief on is like, oh, it won't do it, it won't do it, it won't do it. The tool is able to do it. It's not like there's an error in the code or anything. Like, the tool is definitely capable of doing it. What usually happens is the person trying to do it doesn't meet one of the criteria here, right? So you need to make sure you meet all of this criteria, otherwise it's going to fail. So battery voltage needs to be more than 12.9 volts at idle. Coolant temperature needs to be 150 to 212 Fahrenheit, 70 to 100 Celsius. Park or neutral for AT or neutral for manual. All electric loads off, lights, headlights, radio, AC, defoggers, heaters, etc. Transmission needs to be warmed up. You need to drive the vehicle for 10 minutes before running this procedure. And I think that and coolant temperature might be the two that people just overlook and just, I'm just going to do it cold in the bay, right? We don't want to do that. Idle air volume learning is a function of learning idle air volume that keeps the engine idle speed within a specific range. It must be performed under any of the following conditions. Each time the IAC valve, throttle body, or ECM is replaced, idle speed or ignition timing is out of specifications. It needs to be done under any of those. And then it also needs to do an accelerator pedal release position learning. So make sure the accelerator pedal is fully released. It needs to relearn the accelerator pedal as well. Ignition switch on and wait for 2 seconds. Turn it off, wait for at least 10 seconds. This is where you could screw it up as well if you don't wait quite long enough. And then throttle valve close position learning. Once again, accelerator pedal fully released, and then do this procedure. Before performing the idle air volume learn, make sure the following conditions are satisfied. Learning will be canceled if any of the following conditions are missed for even a moment. That is what I'm trying to impress upon you, right? If I need to do this, I need to make sure everything is exactly the way it needs to be. Otherwise, it's going to fail. Battery voltage more than 12.9 volts. Coolant temperature 70 to 100 degrees Celsius. Gear selector and parker neutral. All loads off, like we said before. Vehicles equipped with daytime running lights. Set the parking brake. The light should go off. Steering wheel straight ahead centered. Vehicle speed 0 miles an hour. Transmission warmed up. Driver for 10 minutes. Key on engine running. Idle not excessively high. All non-idle related codes need to be cleared or repaired as well. So as long as you go through all of those steps, and I admit that's a lot of steps, but that's straight from Nissan. That's not weird. We're just giving you the steps that you need to do, right? So just be aware that that one we get a lot of phone calls on and text. So just be aware you need to make sure you meet every single one of those criteria. And if it moves for even a moment, it will fail. This one is actually had someone comment a couple weeks ago on one of my classes. His name's Kyle Artripaldi. And he said, he used to work for Nissan or whatever. And I said, hey, I'm doing Nissan next. Could you give me some stories? So he said, he's got a couple stories. This one I thought was pretty valuable. But he also did say, other than the CVT issues, really not a lot of weird off the wall problems. If it's a misfire on most vehicles, it's usually probably gonna be coils and plugs. Nothing weird off the wall like you get in some of these other manufacturers that we talked about. But this one he did find. And this was actually one after he worked at Nissan. So he worked for a fleet, and they had a fleet of these MV200s with the 2-liter engine. And what it was is they would get a persistent misfire on cylinder 3 on a lot of these vans. They would do the usual suspects, like I said, plugs, coils, etc. But oftentimes it would also be associated with an overheating or coolant loss complaint. Now, in this particular one where he found this problem, came in for overheating and a coolant loss and really not a misfire. But he decided to pressure test the cooling system to find a leak. 10 minutes go by, nothing happens. So he goes off to work and do something else. Ends up being 30 minutes later, he comes back over to the truck and he can hear water or coolant flowing in the vehicle. And then he looked, he had the head off, and he looked, and there was water leak, or I guess he wouldn't have had the head off. He was looking through the spark plug hole, looking into the cylinder, and he found that it was leaking out of the cylinder head. So the cylinder head was cracked for some reason. So it was leaking out of the cylinder head, was getting in the cylinder, and that was causing a misfire. Also would cause the coolant loss and the overheating, of course. And then he found it on a couple other vehicles, and other techs in his shop had found that same problem on other vehicles too. So that seems like there may be an issue on those. I kind of looked it up, see if there's a TSB, didn't really see anything on that, but this is the kind of stuff we're talking about, right? If I had not known that, or I had not seen that, I would not think to check that for a misfire or for persistent misfire on this. And I'll tell you, when we get to Subaru, there's another one I found that's kind of like that. So these are the kind of things that I, as a technician, would want to know if I had these weird problems that would just kind of come in, right? So that is just one story. And thank you, Kyle, for that submission on your story. Appreciate it. Now let's get to OEM-specific scan tool functions. What are we going to find in there that are going to be specific? Like I said, they're not that fancy. So you're going to find that idle air volume learn that I talked about for sure. That's replacing those idle, not really necessarily the idle air, but replacing the throttle body or cleaning the throttle body is very, very common on this. So you need to do the idle air volume learn after you remove the throttle body for any reason, either to replace it or to clean it. Valve timing control learn is going to be on the variable valve timing, and then read and write data to replace the ECU. So that's kind of like a copy paste. So pretty helpful with that. If I have to replace the computer, I can copy parameters off and paste them. Transmission related tests. As we know, CVT's got an issue, got a lot of issues. So there's actually a CVT fluid deterioration test that you can do. That'll tell you the fluid condition inferred by the TCM based on drive cycles and history of calculated load. So it will tell you if it's over a certain number, the fluid service is required. And then you would need to also do this function after changing the fluid. So that's something. There's also a brake pad replacement mode, right, where it retracts the calipers. And then also there is a radar static calibration. The radar's kind of in an open spot on a lot of them, especially like the Rogue. It's like right in the front bumper. It's not really behind the front bumper. It's just kind of in there in the grill. So it can get damaged. It might need to be, recalibrated or re-aimed at. Probably more common than others that are kind of more hidden. Behind like the grill or something. This one's like right out in the open. I had a rental car that actually had a problem with that. You need targets to fix it, but you could do it with the scan tool if you had the targets. So that's in there. And with that, let's go on the tool and see what we can see with these vehicles. All right, so first one I'm going to pull up is our Rogue, our 18 Nissan Rogue. We'll go on the scanner. And we'll see what we can find. All right, so if we go into engine, for example, it's going to go through there and detect some stuff. There also has built-in freeze frame, which I thought was interesting because we don't only really talk about it with Honda, but Nissan has it too. So if I have codes, I can go in there and I can pull the freeze frame right from here instead of having to go into mode 3, right? No, yes, no. Maybe. I don't remember. I don't remember my modes off the top of my head. It's been a long time. But instead of going to OBD Direct, I don't have to go in OBD Direct to look. All right, for the freeze frame. Special functions. So there's your idle air volume learn, valve timing control learn, saving and writing data to replace the ECU, starter operation counter clear. So I guess that's for when you replace the starter, it's going to erase the data stored in the CPU. So I guess it must learn with the starter. Start stop, I suppose. Evap system close for doing evap tests. That's helpful. Fuel pressure release, VIN registration. So it's got a few tests in there, but like I said, nothing really super fancy. And then if we go on the transmission, well, not that one. Which one has it? Oh, geez. Yeah, a lot of variants on the transmissions too. I'm just going to pull in. I guess I don't have any on this particular one. Simulator kind of just had, there we go, special functions on this. So things like oil pump air bleeding, there's your fluid deterioration display and clear. Engine brake adjustment for that. G-sensor calibrations in there as well. So a few things we can find on that. A lot of variance on that, as I said. A lot of ADAS stuff too we talked about, right? The around view monitor, intelligent cruise control. That's going to be like your a lot of variance on that one again too. So a lot of that's on like your cruise control, cancel, and stuff like that. So let's go to Sure Track data. Let's see what we're seeing. Remember, this data is going to be based on billions of real world repairs. Boy, this is going slow. There we go. All right, so this is based on, this is 2018 Nissan Rogue with a 2.5 liter engine, by far the more popular engine of the two. 344,725 real world repair records we have on this vehicle, down to the engine size. So pads, rotors, that's pretty common. Valve stems, yeah, maybe a little high. AC refrigerant, that seems a little high. So maybe there's some AC issues going on. Caliper slide pins, calipers themselves, maybe the calipers are kind of junky. Noise heard from brakes, number one. So there you go, brakes problem. There's your PL101 code. 849 occurrences of that. EVAP, misfires. What's this 17F0? Transmission related. So once again, transmission stuff. Transmission fluid looked up. Brake discs, PL101 again. AC and op. Noise heard, right? So that's what you're gonna see. That mass airflow problem is number one, 849 times. All right, let's switch to my Altima. And that's going to have pretty much the same scanner functions in there. All right, so if you go into engine, if you go into special functions, right, you got your basically the same stuff. Like I said, not a lot of differences between them. Codes data freeze frame once again built in as well, which is pretty nice. And then if we go into transmission, it's going to have pretty much the same setup. ADAS, even in 14, had a round view monitor and radars that you might need to do. Let's go into my Sure Track. This is one with the 2.5 liter again. 314,000 repairs on that one. Pads and rotors. AC refrigerant once again seems excessive. Brake calipers seems like that seems a little high too. Noise heard from brakes again. So it seems like we got some issues with that. Brakes vibrate. Noise heard. Noise heard. Once again, that PO101 code. Now on this one, there's actually a TSB on it. So if I go in there, there is a TSB for this 13 to 16 Altima. Shows them in the Sentra as well. PO101. Number one thing it tells you to do, no drivability issues, the PO101. I just thought this is kind of wild, right? So inspect the PCV valve first. If the PC valve is orange, replace it. If it's black, don't. And then determine if the ECM needs to be reprogrammed. So you're just going to go look up the part number in there, and if it does, then do that. So there's actually a picture, right? So if the PCV valve is orange, replace it, and that'll solve your problem on a mass airflow problem. I think that's kind of wild. All right, and then reprogram the ECM and road test. And there was another one. If not, did I skip it? I think I skipped it. Yeah. So if not, just reprogram it if it has it and it's not doing stuff. Yes. But if it was already black, don't replace it and then reprogram it. Right. So there is apparently a flash for that. So I thought that was kind of interesting. All down to the PCV valve. And then if we go into like top repairs, the mass airflow sensor, reprogram the module or replace the PCV valve, right? So sometimes it's worth it to look at the bulletin instead of just replacing the mass airflow sensor. It may need a PCV valve and a reflash too. So just so you know. And then lastly, we will go with our Infinity. This one's going to be a little fancier because that's kind of their high end, right? So in the engine, it's going to be actually probably slightly different stuff because it's a different car, right? So it's got a few more things that we have. So target ignition time, still got save and write data, target idle RPM adjustment, ignition timing adjustment, accelerator pedal position clear, exhaust valve timing control, valve timing control. There's that idler volume again. Right, so there's a few more bells and whistles on these. They're a little fancier. Actuator test, let's look in there, right? So fuel pump relays, ignition timings, exhaust valve time and sign angles, cooling fans, as we would normally expect. And this one doesn't have a CVT, right? So not really sure which one it would be. So it's like 50 different variants on Nissan transmissions. So we're not even going to go there. Same ADAS stuff, right? It's going to have very similar systems, but it's got a lot more bells and whistles on the engine. All right, and then we'll go to SureTrack on the Infinity, and I will tell you right now, it's going to have very few repair orders because they're not that common. Premium. All right, so 15,000 repairs on this one, and this was the top seller of that year. And the 3-liter engine is the top repairs on the engine. Pass and rotors, valve stems, AC refrigerant, in this case, evap, cam sensors, fuel rail. Then we're getting down into like the low numbers. So it doesn't seem like a ton of codes on this evap problem. And then brake rotors, drive belts, oil life resets, that sort of thing people are looking for. So yeah, that tends to track there as well. So otherwise, not a lot of weird, wild stuff from what I've seen and what I've been told. So yeah, so that is Nissan and Infinity. Let's talk about what we're going to talk about next week. Next week's always a fun topic and an often misunderstood topic. So it is going to be oxygen sensor testing and repair. So this oxygen sensors can help affect a lot of other things as well, not just the oxygen sensor. You might not just get an oxygen sensor code, could cause fuel trim issues. It's also helpful for diagnosing catalytic converters. So we're going to talk all about that and more next week, same time and same place. As always, every Tuesday, 6 and 9 Eastern. Go to snapon.com/OT if you want to register on Zoom. We'll watch it there. 6 p.m. class goes to YouTube live. So youtube.com/Snap-on Diagnostics. If you are watching on YouTube, make sure you like and subscribe, please. The people who watch these videos, there's a lot of people who are not subscribed. Subscribing doesn't cost anything, but it allows you to keep track of, what's going on and when we post videos and stuff like that. So it'll help. And the 9 p.m. Eastern class goes to my Facebook page. So it's facebook.com/SnapOnJason, all one word, no dash and Snap-on. And you can check me out over there. Give me a follow on Facebook. If you want to see any of our other videos in this series, this is episode 92 today. So anywhere from ADAS to park assist systems and anything in between, they're all free, readily available for you once again on our YouTube channel. If you scan that QR code, it will automatically bring you there and subscribe you. So you can do that. And once again, Snap-on Diagnostics, all for free. I don't know anybody else who gives you this volume of free diagnostic training. So I think it's a really great help for you guys, and we're gonna keep it free as much as we can, right? Until YouTube starts charging, right? But I don't think that'll ever happen. The amount of ads you're gonna see. Also, do we have your email address? So if you did not provide your email address when you activated your scan tool, we probably don't have it, and you're missing out on a lot of other diagnostic related content. We send out an email or 2 a week. It's not like we're gonna spam you every day with this. But this is an example of one of the articles we might send, and it's for a stretch timing chain, how to help diagnose a stretch timing chain. So I think that's pretty valuable. So what you can do is you can scan this QR code, and they'll bring you to a form. You fill out the form, and then we'll have your email address for that, and then we'll be sending you that type of stuff. Repair articles, technical focus articles, blogs, new product releases, if any, that sort of thing. So definitely check that out. Now we'll get to questions. If you did join late on Zoom and you did have any questions, just make sure that you put them in the Q&A box. It's going to be top bottom of your screen wherever your Zoom controls are. Looks like I got a couple on YouTube too. I'll get to in a second, but I do want to also mention my buddy Keith, who also does free diagnostics training. His is more geared towards scan tools. So on Wednesday, it's going to be on Zeus Plus, and on Thursday, it's on Apollo and Triton tools, no matter which one you have. first hour is going to be walking through the scanner functions, right? So it's going to walk through, let's set up your Wi-Fi. Let's talk about Snap-on Cloud. Let's talk about security link and all those other things. And then he goes through code to completion, real world scenario on intelligent diagnostics and what fast track intelligent diagnostics and what it does for you. And then he takes a little break. So that's about the first hour. Like I said, takes a little break. And then after that, he will go through all the scope and meter functions on the tool as well. So it takes you all through guided component tests, lab scope, and stuff like that. So very thorough class. Keith's been with us for well over 30 years. Join us 7:30 Eastern, 6:30 Central, 4:30 Pacific. It's a one-time and night class. Snapon.com/OT, Zoom only if you want to sign up. All right, now let's get the questions. Looks like I got a couple on Zoom. John says, I heard the CVT transmissions have been discontinued. Have you heard any news about this? I have not heard news about that, but would make sense, I guess, right? Would make sense if they're having that much trouble with it, they might get rid of them. I know for sure that when Subaru was developing their CVT, they bought a bunch of those and found all the failure points and then made sure they didn't have them in the Subaru CVT. So that's just one thing that told us the Subarus. But maybe, I mean, I see that Nissan, that Infinity had a non-CVT transmission in it. And if it's a hybrid, it doesn't have a CVT transmission in it either. So possible. Haven't heard that though. And then Jay, welcome Jay. I know we talked over email today. On the PCB reflash, the Snap-on tool can do it. So that would be you need to use a J-Box, like a Pass-Through Pro. Or we also have the Pass-Through Assist where they'd be able to do that as well. You can't really flash a car with a scan tool. Any scan tool, you do need a J2534 like a pass-through device and Nissan software and the like. So yes, Snap-on has a tool that can do it, but your scan tool is not because it's a file. All right, let's look at YouTube. ET says 2 makes I don't work on, Nissan and Cadillac. All right, fair enough. We all have our cars we don't want to work on, right? Curtis saying hello from Texas. The Winton says hello as well. Phil H says Nissan service information is trash. I have heard that. When I was talking to Keith there, he said, yeah, we didn't even get torque specs on half the things we need to torque down. So that's pretty interesting. Let's see. Nick says hello from England. It's like 11 o'clock at night. So thank you very much for checking in as always. Nick says Renault Group owns Nissan, so no more Japanese. The name Japanese, but owned by France. Yeah, so the company is owned by France. I'm sure they still have factories in Japan and all over. Fixtronic says, hi guys from Mexico. Welcome. Thanks you for joining us from Mexico. Nick says, can't wait for the next training. Also says, when working on Nissan, always check for TSBs because working on a French vehicle. Well, I guess it's not technically a French vehicle, right? It's still designed by Japan, but yeah, just evidenced by that one TSB that I showed, definitely. JLE Lobo says, hi Jason, great session. Let's go to 100. Yes, we are going to make it to 100 before the end of the video. Let's see. Colonel Buckshot says, great video. I was surprised to see that Nissan does not have a lot of history and problems with VVT or timing issues. Yeah, I didn't really see too much of that showing up in the data anyways. And from the anecdotal stories I've talked to people with, the only thing they talked about with the VVT is don't take the cams apart, basically, because there's black bolts. Any black bolts, don't touch them. That was the story I got. Let's see. Anthony says, my mom may have been driving a Datsun 210. It may have been. I'm not sure. Last year for the 210 was in 1982. So, yeah, it could have been. I know it was definitely used when she bought it, and it was an ugly yellow color. So if they made an ugly yellow color that year, for sure. And then Colonel Buckshot also says Snap-on do the setup required for CVT replacement. We've been talking about that. I know in order to do it, you have to take a picture of a QR code or something like that. And not all our tools have cameras, so that's been a sticking point. I know engineering was looking into seeing if they had a solution where we could just type it in, because I know on one other manufacturer that I've talked about previously, I don't remember off the top of my head who it was right now, but there was an option to punch in like a 4-digit code or a QR code. So if there is that option, we may work that into the software at some point. Let's see. Okay, Loki Black says Snap-on J2534 is 5.0 driver because for work with Consult, they need the 5.0 driver, and Nissan suggests DrewTech. Well, DrewTech makes it for us. So if you go to the website, it should have the uploaded drivers, or if not, you download the toolbox software. It should be able to download whatever the current drivers are, so it should be compatible with it because it's like I said, it is DrewTech makes it for everybody pretty much. So they make ours for us. So I would imagine it should be able to. John Broham says GM 8-speed transmission have a code on the side, so that's probably the one I'm thinking. So yeah, to have a QR code, and it would have a like a 4-digit code that you would type in alternative. Let's see. Triton D10 cannot actuate compressor clutch on IPDM. Will it be added anytime? Checked across various models and year and no luck. So compressor clutch in the IPD. What's the IPDM, if you would, Joss? What's that stand for? Because the compressor clutch is probably gonna be with the engine, I would think. Let me take a look real quick. I just want to. Let me just pull up the rogue. Let's see. I'm just going to engine real quick. I'm going to pick both of them too, just to see. IPDM, though, I'm not 100% sure what that stands for. See it on that one. Yes, but what is IPDM? You said with it in an actuator test, but what is an IPDM? I'm not familiar with that acronym. See any air conditioning there? Intelligent power distribution module. Thank you. Set body. Oh God, there's a million of them. Let's see. Subject's not available for this vehicle. Get it from one. I don't want to do that. Let's see, headlamps, cooling fan. There's a lot of variants to go through. So I guess at this point, my suggestion would be to call into customer care and see if they can find it at customer care. And let me just one real quick, just to be on the safe side here. There's a million variants of that too. Some manufacturers like Volkswagen and Nissan are terrible about having like, you see how look 3 different protocols we cover: CAN, UDS, and DDL2. If I go into CAN, there's that many different body control modules that could possibly be on the Nissan. It'll be in special functions or actuator tests, but like I said, I don't have time to go through them all right now. Obviously, on a real vehicle, it's not going to give you those options because the tool is going to know what variant's in it. But I'd have to find the proper variant to have it in there. So I would definitely call them and see if it's in the software at all. 1-800-424-7226. Give them a ring and just ask them. Yeah, and then if they either they're gonna find it for you, or they're gonna say it's not in there, and we'll get it on the list of things to put in. Basically, is what that is. And I will tell you, in the last like couple of years, they've really been focusing a lot on those types of calls too. Hey, it doesn't have it. Can we put it in there? So if it's possible, they get in a lot faster now because of it's a customer driven request. So they do put it. They've been putting a lot more weight on those in the last few years. So that's been a wonderful thing. So if you do, this goes for anybody too. Anybody still watching. So if you do find something that you either can't find and think should be there, or know that it should be there, and for some reason it's not in the place where it should be, give them a call and let them know. They'll report it. They'll put it up. They'll run it up the ladder, and it'll be flagged as it was a customer-driven request. So that'll get higher priority in the engineering department. So that's I think that's a wonderful thing that we're taking that more into account now than we ever have. So that's all right. With that, we are through. So I'd like to say thank you very much. Thank you for taking time out of your day to spend a little bit of time with me. Hopefully we learned about a few one of those ins and outs with the Nissan vehicles. Hopefully you'll join me next week for oxygen sensors. And with that, enjoy the rest of your week. Enjoy your weekend. Have a nice night and take care.